everyone, welcome to Glow with Grace. So I wanted to do a wrap-up video for the Vilcabamba video series that I put out recently over the last few months. So I guess it's kind of strange because I'm not actually there, right, in Vilcabamba. I'm here in the US. The girls and I have been here since early March. Yeah, so, I filmed those videos down there before I left. That was kind of the point. But then a few days after we got here, the whole corona situation hit, and as I said before, I was suddenly unsure, like, shall I put these Vilcabamba videos out? Is this weird timing? What do I do with this? I ended up going ahead and putting them out. Yeah, and there've been different kind of questions from people along the way, especially in terms of, how have things been going down there in Vilcabamba during this corona craziness. Yeah, so obviously I'm not the best placed person to be talking about that right now, what life is like in Vilcabamba. However, I am in contact with a lot of people down there and have been during these months, so I do have some insight, some perspective. Yeah, overall Ecuador has had very strict regulations going on these last few months, apparently some of the strictest in the world during this corona crisis. Yeah, so actually in the end I kind of felt grateful that the girls and I have been here rather than there. Although, most of our friends stayed there and, have got through everything, right? Like, everything's been fine. The number of actual cases of anybody showing up with corona in that area have been almost nothing, extremely minimal. People have just had a lot of kind of concern, and there've been, a lot of rules, and that's specifically around Vilcabamba area, right? Different in other parts of Ecuador. Yeah, at this point it seems like things are shifting, things are opening up more. Yeah, more kind of mobility, fewer masks, that kind of stuff. So that sounds like a exhalation of some sort, sense of relief in the space. Yeah, it's been very intense though down there, for sure, from what I hear from people, and especially two of the women who I did interviews with during this Vilcabamba video series. They have been extremely busy. One being Morgan, the midwife, and the other being Mazella, who runs the food bank down there. Yeah, both of them have been absolutely run off their feet. Morgan, the midwife, because people didn't want to or couldn't go to the hospital anymore to birth, so they were reaching out to her, like all these people who she wouldn't usually be dealing with, she was then dealing with. So it's been a lot of work with her. And then Mazella, she runs the food bank, and her husband Phil and she have just been absolutely inundated as well with requests for help and receiving donations, bagging everything up, passing it out, and other people too in the town, like, all these different people trying to kind of pull together to pull everybody through this crisis. Yeah, so I think it's been, pretty intense. I mean, those are just two of the people who I interviewed who I can see have been going through a really busy time during this, right? I'm sure there's been many others as well. And yeah, for sure, like, if you spoke to people who have actually been there on the ground during this time, I'm sure there would be lots of different perspectives shared. That's kind of my summary of what I have understood from what's been going on there. Yeah, and in terms of other things that maybe people have asked about or that have kind of come to my mind that maybe didn't get touched upon during the videos, one thing that I wanted to comment on, and yeah, nobody brought it up, was, let me see if I can explain this well. Definitely not my area of expertise, but the law systems. It's completely different law systems between Ecuador and places like this, for example, like the US or Canada, the UK. So in these kind of Western countries, the system of law in general, we could call it like common law. And then in most of the rest of the world, Ecuador included, the main system that's going on for law is civil law. And yeah, they're completely different. And the interesting part for me, just as, you know, a person living in a place where there's a completely different law system, the interesting part has been about personal responsibility. So in Ecuador, as in many places in the world, there is not this kind of system where you can like sue someone or sue something, really. I mean, it just doesn't really exist. You know, if you get in a car accident, or, you know, like you're a pedestrian and a car hits you or something, probably nothing much is really going to happen in Ecuador. Like you're just expected to have personal responsibility for your actions, and to take care of yourself, because it's a different law system. Yeah, again, I'm sure there's probably people who could explain this better, but I wanted to put something in there about this because I feel like it's such a cultural difference, and it just kind of permeates every part of life, because you're just expected to take care of yourself and not be, you know, like trying to sue someone about something. So everywhere you look, I mean, the things that are considered completely acceptable and reasonable in terms of, you know, like building sites or like potholes in the road, or anything, just the entire landscape that you see around you and the way people interact, everything is affected, right? Because nobody is looking necessarily to sue anyone else for anything. You're just expected to get through life taking care of yourself and like not getting into accidents or whatever. So, you know, I actually remember my first encounter with that kind of a different way of things being years ago on a volunteer trip that I was in, let me see now, I think I was in Slovakia, and I was working at this open air museum there in Slovakia, and I just remember walking around this open air museum and thinking, what on earth? How do they have these displays set up like this? Like there would be a flight of stairs on the side of a building that the public are free to go up and down, and there's not even a handrail, right? It's just like you can just fall off the side of the building. It's your responsibility. Why did you fall off the side of the building? You know. Or, you know, just random old farm machinery with like rusty bits of metal sticking out of it or whatever. Like things that would be unthinkable in, you know, these kind of Western countries that many of us are from, you know, in other places in the world are just how it is. It's just what it is. And people just get on with stuff and don't get themselves into accidents. Yeah, so that's definitely how it is in Ecuador, and that can be quite surprising to foreigners if they go to live there. Okay, so another thing that comes up a lot in discussions around living in Ecuador as a foreigner or expat or whatever, concern kind of finances, the economy, cost of living, these kind of things. So yeah, that's definitely a big draw usually for foreigners, is compared to other places in the world, it can be so much more inexpensive to live in Ecuador. Yeah, depending on how you do it, right? But I mean, in general, it's just a completely different economy. When I left there a few months ago, the average daily wage in the area that we live in, which is rural Ecuador, right, in the Andes, was $20 a day. Yes, a day, not an hour. $20 a day was like an average. And actually at this point, just a few months later, right? But I don't even know. I don't even know what the wage is. I heard, because that worked out, that people were receiving more or less about $400 a month. I heard that the government was trying to put it down to people receiving like $220 a month during this whole crisis that's been going on. I don't know if that went ahead. Anyway, you get the idea. Very, very, very different economy compared to, you know, being in the US or the UK or these kind of countries. Yeah, so $20 a day people are receiving, and you know, you can rent an apartment for maybe $150 a month, $100, $200. I mean, depends. Again, like you could rent a place for thousands of dollars a month, right? But there's very inexpensive options. Like buying food, fresh food at the markets, you know, it's like 3 avocados, big avocados for $1, or 6-7 pounds of potatoes for $1. Like, just incomparable to other places, right? And everything's so fresh and, you know, grown right around there. Yeah, so it can definitely, in many ways, be very inexpensive compared to where other people might be used to being, and especially for kind of retirees, right? It can be an absolute world of difference depending on where somebody would be retiring if they were in their home country compared to being in Ecuador. Yeah, absolutely huge difference. But there are some like weird quirks as well, like cars, for example, are very expensive in Ecuador. And this has to do with the fact, I feel like, things don't lose their value because it's not so much of a throwaway society at all. Like, people do not throw stuff away. It blows my mind here in the US to see how much stuff people throw away. Blows my mind. We're living in this apartment complex here, and every time I bring like the recycling or the rubbish or whatever down to the like rubbish area here, I can't even believe the stuff that people throw into the rubbish here. That would never happen in Ecuador. It would not happen. People do not throw stuff away. Like, I see pretty much anything you can imagine from somebody's apartment down there. Beds, like carpets, rugs, paintings, you know, kitchen equipment, vacuums, tables, chairs, toys, clothing, anything, everything. People just throw it out here. It's just this like throwaway society, you know? Nobody even seems to question if anybody else might want this stuff. And then it's like, it's almost like it's rude or something to even think that somebody else might want it. Like, it just goes in the bin. Or like sometimes they'll maybe put it like to the side of the bin, like maybe somebody wants this thing. And I think especially now, you know, in this bizarre corona time, it's like people just probably think even more that people don't want their stuff. It just blows my mind. That would not happen in Ecuador. And that's where I've been living for the last decade, right? Like, that's what I'm used to. Everything has a value. Everything keeps its value. Things do not lose their value like they do in this kind of place. Like, it's so crazy how you can just buy stuff here and take it back to the shop and get a refund. You know, they give you like 3 months or something to get. You cannot get refunds in Ecuador. You just try. You know, I lived there for a decade. I think I got a refund once on one thing from like an airline or something. You can't get refunds. Once you buy something, that's it. You're stuck with it. It's a completely different system. And equally, it's kind of like if you find something that you want to buy, you probably ought to just buy it right then, because it's not, at least where we live, it's not this kind of, you know, like big box reality where there's like cookie cutters of the same shop all over the place and they all have the same stuff. There is, you know, there's some of that going on in Ecuador for sure, but nothing like being in this kind of, you know, super developed, industrialized kind of country. It's much, much more just like little pokey shops full of random gubbins, and if you find something and you like it, you probably just ought to buy it right then, because you'll probably never be able to to find that shop again for a start, because there's no like proper street. Well, you know, in the cities, yeah, there's like some street names and stuff, but it can be so confusing. Like the address, there's not like a proper address system, really. You know, like it's a different world. Anyway, so things don't lose their value. And so when it comes to cars in particular, they can appear extremely expensive compared to being somewhere like this, for example, in the US, right? Or probably, I imagine, the UK too. I'm not so familiar because I've never driven really. But yeah, you know, in a place like this, you can pick up a secondhand junky old car for whatever, right? Like for a few $100s or something. No way is that gonna happen in Ecuador. Absolutely no way. You know, you buy a car from like the 1990s or something and it will still cost you like, I don't know, 10, 15,000 or something. Things don't lose their value. Yeah, because people don't throw stuff away. They don't have as much stuff. Like I go into houses here in the US and I'm just astonished at the wealth that I see represented in front of me in the furnishings in the rooms. It's like I look around me in one room in one house, and it's like the stuff that's in front of me, I can see that it must have cost more than like most people there where we live in Ecuador would use to like furnish an entire house, right? There's just such an abundance of stuff in comparison, like just stuff. And the throwaway attitude around that stuff, and like the refunds, and like people use stuff in Ecuador until it's like absolutely worn out. Like, you know, it's that kind of society where you still like absolutely go and get your clothes sewn up when they have rips in them, and get your shoes re-heeled or stitched up or whatever, you know, like absolutely that's what's going on. People are so resourceful, and any little bit of anything that they get, they make such great use of. And of course, you know, being in the countryside, people just work out, or they know how to do stuff for themselves, you know. There's not so much reliance on, you know, people being so specialized in like a certain thing. You know, it's not like you have a plumber and an electrician and a this and a that. It's like everyone can kind of do everything, because that's just how they're brought up, like doing stuff for themselves and dealing with stuff. And then another kind of financial aspect of things, as far as I've ever understood it, especially if you're a foreigner, there's no such thing as like a mortgage in Ecuador. I'm sure if you're actually Ecuadorian, you know, you're a citizen, and especially probably more if you're like in the city or something, there must be stuff like that, right? But for foreigners, that kind of a thing doesn't really exist. So yeah, that can kind of make things tricky for people. It's kind of like you got to either buy stuff outright in terms of property, or, you know, work out some kind of a private arrangement, something like that. Another topic that we touched on a little bit here and there, I think, in some of the interviews was the bureaucracy. Oh my goodness. Yeah, they love a bit of paperwork in Ecuador. Yeah, bring on the paperwork. Anybody who's lived there for even a few months will know exactly what I'm talking about. They just love the paperwork. You know, it's like anywhere, anything you've got to do that's kind of like official in some kind of a way, like with the government, visas, all that kind of stuff, banks, anything. Um, yeah, you ought to be prepared for very long waits. Nothing is likely to go fast. You're probably going to have to jump through several hoops to get anything to happen with anything. You're probably going to have to produce like multiple photocopies of different IDs, and this has got to be apostilled, and this has got to be notarized, and this would have to be translated, and da 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 da. Like, it's pretty remarkable the level of paperwork that they require for pretty much anything. Yeah, so that's something that can feel very frustrating to a lot of foreigners, especially when they first move there, because it is not what a lot of us are used to anymore, right? We're used to much faster pace of service. There's pretty much no customer service in Ecuador. It doesn't really exist. Like, yeah, things just are how they are, you know, and it's like, again, you just deal with it. Like, you take personal responsibility for just dealing with stuff, and no one's going to be kind of like pandering to you about anything. It's like, this is just how stuff is, and this is how long it takes, and there you go. Yeah, so customer service is an extremely rare thing. And bureaucracy is just prime paperwork. They love the paperwork. Another thing that we didn't touch on all that much, which I guess some people found surprising, was one of the reasons Vilcabamba is kind of known worldwide is for its centenarians. An unusual number of people aged 100 and above. I think possibly that's still the case. I'm not exactly sure. It's not something that anybody who's actually living there really talks about all that much, in my experience. There is like a kind of old people's community center or something like that on the main road into Vilcabamba, where a bunch of elders gather, usually on the weekends, I think, and kind of hang out, and it's super cool, you know, to see them all there. For sure, like, people are so capable there into old age. That's pretty remarkable. You know, you'll see people regularly, like 80, 90, who knows how old, you know, out just going about their lives, right? Like, doing their shopping, carrying these like crazy heavy sacks of stuff on their backs. Again, like, people are just capable and responsible. They know how to do stuff. They just get on with stuff. Yeah, so there's a lot of different theories about why. Why is Vilcabamba one of these kind of hotspots for longevity? It's actually known as a valley of longevity. I don't know if anybody really settled on a particular reason why. I think there's lots of different ideas. Some people think, you know, it's because of the water in the area. Tara mentioned that, I believe, in her interview. She was talking about the water and how it has all these minerals in it, and it's like the headwaters. It's very clean, very pure. You know, it's a great climate, great air quality, very like simple, relaxed way of life. People are very physically active. They walk a lot, they work a lot, you know, on the land. Yeah, I'm sure there's other things as well, other theories that people have come up with that I'm forgetting, but yeah, it's definitely interesting how there's this disproportionately large number of very elderly people there, and very capable, very elderly people. All right, I think the last thing I want to mention is wildlife in the area. Yeah, the fauna especially. So, you know, really in comparison to other places in the world, there's not all that much wildlife, you know, especially in terms of like mammals. There seem to be very few like wild mammals. Lots of birds, amazing, and hummingbirds and butterflies. The things I really wanted to touch on though is like things people ask about is like snakes and spiders and bugs and stuff. Um, Definitely, yeah, definitely all of those. Yeah, for sure. I've seen, I don't know, maybe like half a dozen snakes or something during my time there. And I personally know 3 animals who all died by snake bite. 2 horses and one of our dogs, actually. The horses weren't ours. So yeah, that's a real thing. The locals are generally extremely scared of snakes, so they tend to kill any snake they come across, whether it's venomous or not. Um, yeah. So there's definitely snakes around. I've never known any humans have issues with them, like getting snake bites. There's scorpions too. Bugs everywhere. And ticks. Oh my gosh, so many ticks. Yeah, but no Lyme disease as far as I know. It's not like being in North America where that has that whole other aspect to it. There's just ticks. Because it's where we are, at least it's rural, right? And there's a lot of, you know, dogs and cats. Oh my gosh, street dogs everywhere. That's another thing that foreigners often find shocking. Yeah, completely different. And to have a dog there who is an actual breed, not just like a random street dog, it's weird to foreigners to get their heads around, but it's like a status symbol there. If you have like an actual breed of a dog, or a dog who isn't just like this random scruffy street dog, it's like a status symbol. And so that gets kind of weird because people will steal other people's dogs because it's considered, you know, valuable in some way. I know so many dogs who've been stolen. People also poison dogs if they're, you know, like afraid, because dogs are used there very much for security. That, like, dogs and cats have a role in people's homes, you know, with the locals at least, and with a lot of the foreigners too. Like, the dogs are the security, and the cats are there to help keep the rodents away, right? And most local families will have chickens for sure, probably. And a lot of them will have other animals too, right? Maybe they have a donkey for something, or a mule, or a horse for something. Maybe they got some pigs. Like, you know, it's a rural area. So yeah, very different attitude towards animals than what we might be used to in other countries. You know, I see that here, like coming here to the US after a decade of being there, and, you know, like, people have their dogs like living in their houses with them, with like clothing on. And like, I go into the pet shops here, and it's like, I can't even believe the stuff that is available in these pet shops. It's like, the animals in Ecuador could only dream of such a place, right? It's completely beyond their wildest dreams. The clothing and the toys and the treats and it's wild. It's like a completely different reality. Yeah, anyway, so I think something that used to come up a lot during the retreats that we used to hold there in Ecuador was that people could not believe how many insects would be in their houses, or like in the accommodation they were in. And I always just found that really funny. It's like, well, yeah, we're like in the countryside, right? And I mean, it would be kind of weird if there weren't insects like in your house somewhere, um, because there could be any kind of insect, like multiple insects probably inside your house, right? There's probably going to be some butterflies or maybe a dragonfly and some beetles and some flies. Like, yeah, we're like way out there in the countryside. It's like we are the weird kind of blip in their environment, right? It's not like being here. Oh my gosh, like on the outskirts of LA. Now it helps me to understand, right? Because I feel like I barely see insects here. It's like the opposite. Like if I see an insect has somehow got into our apartment, it's like, how did you even do that? Like, where did you come from? Whereas, yeah, down there it's like the opposite. It's like how would you even keep insects out? Like they're just kind of everywhere, you know? It's just how it is. All right, I feel like there is so much that could be said. I gotta stop somewhere though, so I think I'm gonna stop here. Yeah, and I hope this has been enjoyable for you. I know some people have found it odd, like, why are you doing these videos about Vilcabamba? Yeah, as I said at the very beginning, it was just something I felt to do, you know? It felt like we were kind of coming to the end of this 10-year chapter of being there basically non-stop for a decade, and yeah, just wanted to kind of capture something about what our lives have been like there. So hopefully that is what we've been doing here, and hopefully it's been of some interest. I know some of you have been saying that, yeah, it's piqued some kind of an interest for you, and maybe you'll be headed down that way soon. So best wishes to anyone for whom that is the story, and yeah, for everyone, thanks for watching. Ciao.